Eugenio Suarez was traded earlier today. And Lyle, I just have a suggestion for Jerry Dipoto. If he's going to make a trade on the eve of a holiday that everyone just doesn't want to have to focus on work and worrying about all these other things, could he do one that gets reflected in a more positive light? Is it too much to ask?
That is too much to ask. Come on, dog. Like, what do you expect? Did you think the night before Thanksgiving, the stars would really align for the Mariners, the Seattle Mariners, where they sign Shohei or go trade for Yandy Diaz or go sign Blake Snell? Like, it's not going to be that easy. You should know better than that by now.
I know you just wanted to like go into the holiday and not have to worry about anything. And you and I, like, we had a nice episode planned today. We still have part of it that we're going to touch on with Jorge Soler, knock out a couple things and enjoy our Thanksgiving, Lyle. But instead, the vibe has turned significantly on this Thanksgiving Eve.
Oh, it's bad vibes only.
Yeah, it is bad vibes only. So the summary of the trade, Jerry swings a trade with the Arizona Diamondbacks. Eugenio Suarez will go hang out with Paul Sewald now down in the desert. The Mariners acquire 24-year-old reliever Carlos Vargas back and backup catcher Sebi Zavala. Well, that doesn't really move the needle for me too much, dog. The details of this, I think they're thinking Sebi Zavala will be the backup catcher this year. He's had some decent defensive numbers. He also had a decent offensive season for a backup catcher in 2022 with a 110 WRC plus. But you don't usually trade your starting third baseman for a backup catcher. So if I'm going to get to the bottom of this, Lyle, this is the Mariners making their most prominent effort yet to rid their lineup of strikeouts. I think that's what this is.
Do you want to start with the Mariners side of this, like with Sebi and with Vargas, or do you want to start with the Geno side?
Well, let's start with the Geno side. I know people want to hear this.
Okay. Yes, they are trying to cut down on strikeouts. I think a couple weeks ago when we talked about Teoscar declining the QO, or sorry, the Mariners not giving him the QO, that we said, yeah, he's probably not coming back now. And I said, probably not, but maybe if it gets late in the offseason, they'd think about it. Well, after this trade, my opinion's changed. Now there is absolutely no way Teoscar Hernandez is coming back, because what they are trying to do very clearly is get rid of strikeouts. I think they are sick and tired of seeing all these strikeouts in the lineup, and I think they were tired of seeing it in 2023. That's why they traded Geno. He has a year of club control left. There is a club option for 2025, so I guess technically he has 2. But they very, very clearly want to punch out a lot less, and they are going to the extreme of trading your third baseman, who was one of the best defenders in baseball last year, and we know can hit for power, to execute on that. Because it's not like there's not going to be strikeouts in the lineup. You've still got Julio, who strikes out a lot. You've got Cal, who strikes out a lot. You've got Kelnick, who strikes out a lot. But Teo and Geno both struck out over 200 times last year, and their K rates sit around the 30% mark every year. Clearly, the Mariners said, look, we've got to get rid of this. This is enough. Something has to change, and it's starting with this. Now, I don't think that made the fans too happy, but I think if you're trying to get inside the mind of Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander, that's what they're thinking.
It's even more prominent when you take a look at these numbers. Luke Arkins brought all these numbers together. Shout out to him. He put together a very nice thread on Twitter about the combination of Eugenio Suarez, Teoscar Hernandez, Tom Murphy, and Mike Ford last season. 4 guys who are almost certainly not on this Mariners roster in the 2024 season. Look at their 2023 numbers. Nearly 1,800 plate appearances combined at a 31% strikeout rate between those 4. Combined 31% strikeout and 1,800 plate appearances. Those guys, that will be no longer. Those 1,800 plate appearances will not be back on the Mariners in the 2023 or the 2024 season. A very prominent effort by Jerry and co. Now look at the hole this leaves on the Mariners roster. You have now just lost your starting third baseman for marginal upgrades. You have a guy who's going to be a reliever. He threw 4 innings last year, and then a backup catcher slotting in for Eugenio Suarez's spot. You would imagine Geno would have had a little bit of a bounce back season in 2024, and he still probably will with the Diamondbacks in a more comfortable hitting environment. But you're now losing a significant amount of power in your lineup. You're losing a little bit of on-base skill in your lineup, and your defense definitely gets worse as well at the hot corner. If they think that Luis Urias is going to slide over to third base and replicate all of Geno's success, that's not true. And that leaves less prominence in the lineup as of now. So I think that's how it sits in the Mariners subtracting Geno in that perspective. I do think Sebi Zavala if he ends up being the backup catcher and he returns a little bit of his 2022 form, can actually benefit the Mariners this season. But I'm going to say benefit as a true backup catcher and not the role Tom Murphy tried to occupy last year, which was essentially be their pseudo DH in the second half. Seby Zavala is not going to do that, but be a good backup catcher. I mean, that's certainly a valuable asset to have on your roster.
Sure, backup catchers and good backup catchers are important, especially because Seby Zavala blocks the ball very well and he's a good pitch framer. That's why they like him. He's a good defender, and in those two areas specifically, he really thrives. He blocks the ball and he frames pitches well. But let's make this abundantly clear, because as we currently sit, if it was opening day today, you'd have Luis Urias at third base and Ty France at first base. So let's just state this and be as clear as we can speak about it. The current roster as we sit right now is worse than what it was as we ended 2023. Between getting rid of Isaiah Campbell and getting rid of Gino, it is worse than where it sat at the end of 2023.
Yeah, you're abundantly clear and very correct with that. And we're saying this, I'm trying to say a little bit more calm. I was a little bit more animated earlier, but I think as the day has worn on, I've calmed down a little bit. I mean, there has to be another move coming. Like, that is the only acceptable reason for this, is that there's a significantly more prominent move coming to fill this roster out. Because if there's not, then you and I really, really, really have an issue. And I just want we should honestly, Doug, we could dedicate a segment on this podcast to reading through the replies of Mariners tweets every time they promote tickets on their account. It had another prime opportunity yesterday that you sent me, and people were just having a field day. Well, could you imagine those comments now? I'm sure there's some people who have gone back to that tweet now and are like, double down on what they just said. Because a trade like this, optics-wise, is not good. It's not really good. They did shed $9.5 million in salary. Joe Doyle made a pretty good tweet, a pretty good point about this. This isn't a true salary dump to those who thinking this is straight cash dump. It's not really, because Luis Urias carries a $5 million price tag and what he's going to get in arbitration. The net is saving about $4 million, which I don't know if you can get too mad over $4 million. That's not a monumental amount. But what the optics of what this looks like and the initial message right now to that Mariners clubhouse is not good. Like, Lyle, if I stuck a mic in Cal Raleigh's face right now and asked him what he thought about the current state of the Mariners roster, what does he say?
I bet you he's pleading the fifth.
Yeah, yes, he is.
I mean, look at the reaction from some of his teammates today. I saw Cal, I saw Kelnick, I saw JP Crawford all put out thank you Gino posts, a couple other guys too. I saw Taylor Saucedo tweet about how awesome Gino was. I would recommend go checking out that tweet because, as always, Taylor keeps it very real and very genuine. Guys loved Gino, like above what he did on the field, above still being a 3-win player despite a down offensive year in 2023. You're talking about a guy who was the heartbeat of that clubhouse. You're talking about a guy that brought positivity, a beam of energy, was always smiling. Like, you talk about good vibes only with Gino. He would lift these guys up a lot of the time. Guys loved being around him. Luis Castillo talked about how much he loves Eugenio Suarez. He said he is one of the best teammates I have ever had. And I'll bet you, I don't know this for certain, but I'll bet you Gino played a factor into Luis signing that extension before the end of 2022. Well, now Gino's gone. So if you're just talking about clubhouse vibes and just feel, which this is totally away from where we usually kind of direct our talking points because we're usually very analytically driven. But if you're just talking about the clubhouse, you've essentially ripped out the Mariners' heartbeat in both Paul Sewald and Eugenio Suarez and shipped it down to the desert. That's what you've done if you're just going off clubhouse vibes.
And the clubhouse vibes are, as you said, significantly worse. And we're honestly looking past the simple fact that Eugenio Suarez played every single game for the Mariners last season. 162 games he played last season, and he's no longer on your roster this season. Significant in a number of ways. I'm anticipating, Lyle, another move coming because it has to be. This is the only acceptable, logical reason for the Mariners doing what they did for this. Because if there's not another acceptable move coming, well, I've already told you what I'm going to do, but I think I'll save the meat of it until we know a little bit more for certain what might actually happen this offseason. It still is early. The winter meetings are 2 weeks away. So I would ask some people to, at least for now, take a deep breath, and let's let some things play out. Once the offseason is a little bit more shaken out and we get a clearer picture, I think we can more properly react. And if you guys want to get angry, don't worry. Once we get down to the end of this offseason, I'll be right there with you, right in the front of the line.
If they don't make further moves, is what you
Correct.
mean. I agree with all of that. Now, I'm going to ask you a yes or no question, and then I'm going to follow up. I'm pretty sure I know what your answer is going to be. We said, as of Wednesday morning, before this trade was made, we've been saying for the last few weeks at least now, the Mariners need to add at least 2 impact bats this winter, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what they have now done with this trade of Gino is change the barometer, because now you're talking about 3. You now, after moving Eugenio Suarez to the Diamondbacks, need to go get 3 impact bats this winter. And if you don't, I don't think people should accept anything less. That's what this team needs. You now need 3 true impact bats to help this lineup. And if it's not going to be Shohei, here's an example that I thought of. Jeimer Candelario is already being lightly linked to the Mariners after this trade. You've seen John Morosi tweet about it a little bit, who's usually plugged in with the Mariners pretty well, but we'll see if that has validity or not. If that's true, it needs to look something like this. You need to go sign Jeimer Candelario. You need to go sign Jorge Soler, who we'll talk about in a little bit. And you need to go trade for Yandy Diaz. If you go do those 3 things, fine. You have made up for and then some the losses you've taken. But if you do less than that, I don't think fans should accept anything less, because we said they need 2 bats entering the offseason. Now, after losing Gino, you need 3. And I don't think that's unfair.
Do you think they're going to get 3?
Oh, what do I think versus what do I want to happen is 2 totally different things. I believe that this team should go acquire 3 real bats. Do I think that's going to happen? Unfortunately, history is not on their side with this, so I would probably say no.
Yeah, I'm going to say no too. It was tall enough of a task when it was only 2 impact bats. When it was only 2, when they only had to go acquire 1 by trade and then pony up the money and sign another one. But 3 is going to be something significant. We'll float the idea of Matt Chapman out there as well, and I think you and I are going to touch on that in a later episode, going into a little bit more detail about the potential of the former Blue Jays third baseman potentially being a fit on this Mariners roster. He would qualify as well. But it's plain and simple, because this team is worse now than they were at the end of the season. The lineup is worse. The defense is worse. The pitching staff, because of the defense, is now worse off with this trade than they were at the end of the season. So you've pretty much made all 3 phases of your team worse this offseason because of letting Teoscar Hernandez walk and letting Eugenio Suarez get traded out the door in this move. We're waiting for what the next domino is of this offseason. This literally cannot be it. I'm not going to let myself believe that it will be it. I don't want to get sucked down into this hole of negativity, especially during this holiday season. I just can't do it. I need to be more upbeat, more positive. But the pressure's on now because the players see this. Imagine what that players group chat was looking like after this trade, trying to figure out what Jerry is trying to do and what they ended up doing with Eugenio Suarez. I could only imagine what it was, and it's definitely tense times down there in that clubhouse.
Is what I said unfair, though? Again, forget about what do we think the Mariners are going to do. Is that an unfair expectation to set, saying they need 3 real bats this winter? I don't think it is.
No, it's not. Not if you want to win a World Series. If you don't want to win a World Series, that's a whole different discussion.
If they don't want to win a World Series, then you rebuild, which they're not going to do because they just went through a rebuild, and they are in no need to rebuild, of course. But if you're not winning a World Series, then you're tearing it down and trying again, which is what teams that don't think they can win the World Series do. The Mariners should have every belief that they can do that. They were 2 games away from having the same record as the Astros and Rangers last year. They should be adding offense. Again, adding impact, not subtracting. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to lose Gino, and we look back in March, and they seriously, in this scenario I've created, have Jeimer on the team, have Soler on the team, have Yandy Diaz on the team. Great. That's great. They proved everybody wrong. But you've now set that expectation because you cannot be subtracting bats and then stand pat. If you go into the season with Luis Urias as your opening day third baseman, like that's a real problem.
That's a real problem. The roster will recognize that's a real problem. And I don't want to throw this term out there lightly. I can't have the Mariners front office gaslighting their fans again. I can't have the GM, when he first gets hired, telling us how confident he is in getting Shohei Ohtani, and then end up falling flat on his face. And his public exposure of the negotiations were a reason that they didn't end up getting Shohei Ohtani. Or the fact that at the beginning of the 2023 season, the Mariners throw a video out there where they write on a whiteboard saying, win it all, and then underline it twice, and then go throughout the season and not do what it takes to go win a World Series, whether it be playing on the field or acquisitions in season, et cetera, or acquisitions in the offseason. And then to come out and the fans after the offseason and say how much of a success your organization is and how much of a step forward you've taken and how, this offseason is critical in expecting that you're going to compete for a title next season. And now we sit here at this, and it's like that the only word I can use to describe all of what I just said, Lyle, is gaslighting. That's it. That's all it is. And Mariners fans have been through too much to be gaslit, to be lied to be told to be patient ever more like this, like the offseason, to be patient any longer. They don't deserve any of that. And that's why this is so frustrating, because there's no way any Mariner fan should have to wait any longer to have a team that cares about winning, period. That's it.
3 bats. It's that simple. I'm going to keep speaking it into existence. And if they sign said impact bats, I'll start checking them off the list. They go trade for Yandy Diaz. I'll say, great. You've got 1, 2 to go. You go sign Jamer. I'll say, great. 2 down, 1 to go. But we're counting and we're setting this expectation at 3 bats, because losing Teoscar and losing Gino has set that precedent. That's what you need. So those guys need to be replaced. I know, look, you didn't give Teoscar the QO, right? So you're saving a lot of money in that regard. You're saving a little bit of money when you net the Gino trade and the Urias trade. But that money, as we've talked about, needs to go be used elsewhere. Like, go out and spend it, go out and acquire talent, and get the 3 bats that you need, because that is what the team needs. I'm glad they're cutting down on strikeouts. I think it helps if they don't strike out a bunch. I think everybody would agree with that. But you need to still supplement with real bats. And the 3 guys we outlined, Soler, Diaz, Candelario, those are 3 guys that don't strike out a whole ton. They really don't. We'll get into Soler here more in a minute or two. But they are not guys that are just going to kill your strikeout rate. So it's not unreasonable to say those things. Also, those 3 guys shouldn't even cost that much. Diaz is on a cheap contract. I don't think Soler is getting a ton at the DH spot, money-wise. I don't think Candelario is getting some crazy contract. Like, this is not an unreasonable ask either, to say, get those 3 guys. It's really not.
And I think most people are convinced, though, knowing the history of this organization, the budget they have run, that it's going to be 1 impact bat, and it's going to be like, well, that should be enough. That's what people are going to think. And if I'm going to think, Lyle, I'm going to think that's what they're going to do until we're proven otherwise. We have our checklist for what they need to do to contend. You just laid it out perfectly. That is what they need to do. If they want to go win a World Series, that is it. And then there's what we expect, which might be a little closer to what I just said. It's up to Jerry to go prove which one of those things we're going to check off.
I really hope in like 2 months, this whole segment ends up on Old Takes Exposed and we're totally wrong. They have Shohei, they have Yandy Diaz, they've gone and signed Blake Snell, whatever. I really hope they do all those things, but they have not earned the right to ensure the trust in their fans that that's going to happen. They need to go out and prove it. And I really, really hope they do. It's that simple, right?
Yes, it is that simple.